This time I'll call the meeting of the Marshal City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone to here this evening. We have an agenda before us. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is to consider that agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. We'll move to agenda item number 3. Agenda item number 3 is to consider the approval of the minutes of the special meeting that the City Council had on June 12, 2018, as well as the minutes of the regular City Council meeting that was also held on June 12th. So the Council does have the minutes of both of those meetings. Are there any corrections to note?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Kyle, yep. So that motion does pass. Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is the bituminous resurfacing project on various city streets. We have 2 actions to consider. The first action would be the resolution declaring the official intent regarding the reimbursement of the expenditures, and then the second action would be the resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract. So I'll call Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer, for this explanation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Probably the explanation I wanted to give you is about the bidding process itself and what the Council and our department has done in the past concerning mill and overlay projects. We budget for them separately under our maintenance item in the street department. And it's $350,000 that was established for this year. Historically, all that money then went into the mill and overlays. But because of the ADA requirements, we're required now to do reconstruction of all the intersections for sidewalks and access points when you do a mill and overlay. It's not considered a maintenance project anymore. It's called reconstruction or rehabilitation of the surfacing. So in this case, in our project, that $350,000, $82,000 approximately is improvements for ADA at intersections in the mill and overlay area. So that's what you'll see is about $307,000 was the street costs and $82,000 was the ADA portion. Now that's required. So I'm not complaining about what we have to do because it's the law to do it that way. But I will say that we're going to have to take that into account in our budgeting process for the next few years in doing overlay work. So I am recommending that we award the entire amount, and the secondary one is to award it up to $350,000 and we cut back the projects. So we're recommending that the entire amount be awarded. If you have any questions, I'd certainly.
Questions for Glenn? John?
Yeah, just confirming then that $82,000 plus that we spend is not reimbursed by any other department then?
It is not.
Okay. It has to come out of ours.
Other questions? Thank you, Glenn. I will accept a motion on the resolution declaring the official intent regarding the reimbursement of the expenditures.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by John. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion on that motion.
On this street project, this is another one that we're having an overrun from what was budgeted of a little over 10%. Same as we had an overrun in Saratoga of 14%. I think we need to, and we just had a discussion on the budget a little bit ago, but I think we should watch these overruns, and if 350,000 was figured into the budget, this is a good opportunity to just fund $350,000, such as was budgeted in the original budget. I agree with you, Glenn. This is an opportunity for us to say 350,000 is what was put in the budget. That's what we should spend.
Is that a motion?
No,
There's a motion on the floor already.
On the floor. Other discussion on the motion? And of course, this motion is the resolution declaring the reimbursement. So, other discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. And then the second action is the resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract.
So I guess this is the point where we basically put in 350,000 into the budget. You selected a number of streets, and along with the ADA compliance and all that, when that figures in, we're coming out at 360,000, 389,000.
Yep.
Rather than that. Okay. So it's not necessarily, I guess, Jim, a estimation wrong. We just set a level, and what we would like to get done is higher than that. So I'm not saying I disagree with your 350,000 as a limit, but that was our limit, and we're there. We're beyond that, so we can't quite do everything that we would like, is what you're saying.
Right.
And I agree. I think we should keep the limit at 350,000. And I'll make that a motion that we spend up to 350,000.
I'll second it.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Glenn for the resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract to Dunnick Incorporated in the total amount for the maximum cost of $350,000. Glenn?
And we do have a listing of those areas with the map that was shown. We would eliminate East Thomas Avenue from McFarland Circle to Saratoga Street in order to accomplish the 350 budget. We would have enough money to do some of those ADA improvements, and we'll do those maybe to maximize what we can do, and then next year we'll come back with this street. So that would be our plan of attack.
And I think that sounds like a really good plan.
And we've already indicated that to the contractor who bid it at the bid opening. We indicated to him how much we had budgeted for it, and we may limit it to that, so he's aware of it as well.
Other discussion on the motion? Now we'll move to a vote.
We should change that to up to 350,000, if you would, not in the amount of, if that's all, if you can do that.
That would be the correct motion, up to 350.
Up to. Thank you.
And that motion does pass.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 is a consent agenda. We'll bring the items on the screen that are on the consent agenda. They include the authorization to receive state and federal surplus property and for Robbie and Tessa DePestel to be authorized to be on the signature card with the email notifications for surplus state properties. Consider the resolution authorizing the transfer of surplus funds and the closure of Debt Service Fund 361. Next, consider the resolution that would authorize the transfer of surplus funds and closure of Debt Service Fund 396. Consider the approval of an off-sale 3.2% malt liquor license for Qual Loquay, 300 East College Drive, Marshal. Consider the application for the exempt permit for the Minnesota Chapter of National Wild Turkey Federation, the Buffalo Ridge Gobblers, for an event September 15, 2018. And finally, consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
Number 9.
Any other item? If not,
Make a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda.
Second.
motion by John, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 11, which was agenda item number 9. Jim?
I'm just curious what establishment this is. I tried to figure it out. Go ahead.
It is 300 East College Drive. It is right next to the Freedom gas station. It is a new business.
That's what I was.
They're renting the location from the owner of the building, but it is a new business that's starting up.
Okay, thank you. I knew it was in that block because I couldn't picture what.
Yeah.
So Jim?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Motion by Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 12 is related to the Lyon County Historical Society Museum. This request was tabled at our last meeting. I'd entertain a motion to remove it from the table for discussion.
I so move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. So then the action to consider, which was tabled for discussion this evening, is to consider the funding in the amount of $25,000 to the Lyon County Historical Society. That's what the request was, $25,000 or $26,000 for match for the Legacy Project. We had the presentation at our last meeting. I think the discussion was, and the reasons for tabling was not so much is there support for this, because my sense is that there is support for this, but the discussion was the source of the funding. So that's what would be up for discussion, and ultimately would be our responsibility to take action one way or another. Craig?
Mr. Mayor, originally I had indicated that I thought maybe this would be appropriate for the Capstone endowment, but after looking at that and thinking about what the Capstone is really intended for, I think this is more appropriate as something out of more of our general levy revenues, and I believe we had a substantial underuse or underspend of those in, 2016? 17. So I think in light of how we operate in partnership with the county, both on the library and the museum, it seems appropriate that we fund this out of our regular revenue funds and leave the Capstone endowment for those special things that we maybe normally wouldn't put in, kind of the one-time things that aren't more of our annual maintenance commitment. I know that this isn't something that the museum is asking for annually, but I do think that it's appropriate for us to fund this as we would any other capital project. And I'd make that a motion, actually.
You want to restate your motion?
I move that we approve funding for the museum's request for $25,000 and do it out of our general revenues.
Motion by Craig. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Discussion?
I think I disagree with you on where the funding should come. I'd like to provide some support for the Historical Society, but I feel a better source of funding would be the Capstone Endowment Fund, which we had thought about before. Tonight we're going to consider whether or not we give a certain amount of money to the Veterans Memorial Park, and we're looking at trying to take that money from the Capstone Endowment Fund. And if you look at the Capstone Endowment Fund, one of the things that it says there, it's for projects that have other private or city funds may receive additional consideration for funding. I think both of those projects, whether it's the landscaping for the park or the work done at the Historical Society, they're both seeking additional funding from other sources. And these are not things that normally come out of our budget. And that's what the endowment was for these where we can get some matching funds and for something that's normally not taken out of our regular budget. We are already, I believe, providing $21,000 worth of funding for the Historical Society. Isn't that part of our annual budget? And so they're already getting $21,000 out of the annual budget. And just because we had, let's say, a good year last year and built up the fund balance doesn't mean we got to spend it right away. And I would like to see the endowment fund be used for both projects. If you look at the endowment fund, it's got about $31,000 in it right now. And the income that we can spend from that every year is somewhere between around $11,000, $12,000. What I'd like to see happen is that we make commitments to both the Veterans Memorial and to the Historical Society in the amount of $25,000 for the Historical Society and $30,000 for Memorial Park. And that the funding come from what's in the endowment fund right now and the income for the next couple of years. That would give us enough to fund both projects. I think they're worthy projects, but I would like to see them come out of the endowment fund and not out of the general fund. And what we're talking about is probably about a year and a half difference, because as I look at your financial statements, on December 31st of 17 is when we had the $31,000. By the end of this year, we'll probably have an additional $11,000, $12,000. So we'll be up to like $41,000, $42,000. And then we got one more year to wait, and they could have another $11,000 or $12,000. I think both projects are not going to start tomorrow. I mean, they're in the process of raising funds. And so it's not like they need the money immediately. So my preference would be that we not use the general fund for this type of expenditure, that instead we use the endowment fund.
So just a point or a question on that, and you can clarify, but I believe the request from the Historical Society is a pledge, because it would be dependent on the grant being awarded, and maybe you'd want to address that. You would make your grant application process, and when an award would be made is when. Yes.
Could I just address that too? If I were to make the motion would be such that both the Historical Society and Memorial Park would receive the funds at the later of the beginning of construction or when funds are available in the endowment fund. And so funds would not be paid to them until actual construction starts.
So thank you for being here. If you want to just clarify.
July 20th is our deadline, and we will find out in December if we were awarded the legacy grant. So implementation would start in January, and it's about a 11th month project. So it would finish at about October, November of 2019 if we get the implementation.
So your suggestion could work.
Yeah. So
To make a commitment.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank
You
you.
need a pledge, not a check in hand.
Pledge, a commitment, yes. And if we don't receive legacy funding this year, we will reapply next year. The grant application's once a year that you can apply for.
And just for reminding us again, what was the dollar amount on legacy grant that you're requesting?
The total cost of the project is $450,000, and we're trying to get as much of a match to around the $120,000 range so we can really bring that down. So it'll probably be around $300,000 that we're asking the state for legacy funding.
So Craig, with that information.
Pretty sizable.
Yeah, very large.
I'd like to withdraw my motion, Mr. Mayor.
And you're withdrawing your second?
I would, there's some good, maybe as a question of where does it really come from? Yes, we don't have to necessarily spend it. I'm not very much in favor of pre-spending endowment, and that's really what we're doing. We're pre-spending the next couple of years in that, and I'm having a little harder time with that part.
I think the other consideration, though, and of course we just sat through an audit presentation that this would not come out of general fund this year because of
Right.
it would come out of general fund next year. So if it was in fact general fund, it would have to be incorporated into our budget process.
So is there a motion or isn't there a motion? I'm kind of confused.
So there's a motion on the table.
We can go ahead and vote on the motion.
On that, I agree with Glenn. I think these are both good one-time uses of the fund. I think, and I visited several veterans on this issue today. I have great respect for veterans. What 9 out of the 10 I visited to said they do not want their property taxes to go up. They do not want this to, don't use our property taxes. We have, another one said we have a war memorial already in town. So I think using this with the endowment fund is a good one-time use of that. And for the library, I think it's a good use too.
It's actually the museum. I kept saying library too, and I apologize
museum at
for
the
that.
old library. You're correct. Yeah. But because,
Library.
For the Capstone fund, that their display sets up for all generations, and gives recognition to all people in Southwest Minnesota in the various groups, and then the memorializes our veterans. So I like Glenn's idea. I know it is prepaying. I kind of agree with you on that. But sometimes when you have two good subjects come up, you just make that choice.
And we have a history of funding good projects in the past that are one-time projects and recognizing there's additional revenue. And the most recent example was the performance mobile stage that was done.
Right.
And that was a multi-year obligation.
And even if parts of these, Jim, and I get your point, but even if parts of these come out of the general revenue, I mean, there's a piece that as a community, we as a community need to maintain the quality of life, and those things that comes out. I mean, I have people that park in the parking lot at work that get on the bike trail, and they talk about the value added to the community, and they talk about the obvious investment that the community makes in itself. So I agree. I think Glenn made a great pitch for this is more appropriate than out of the Capstone endowment. If I had to pick between the two, I think this, we can work it either way. But I mean, there's a motion on and seconded, and maybe the motion gets voted on and fails, and then we go try something else or what have you. But either way,
the motion on the table is to provide one-time funding in the amount of $25,000 to the Lyon County Historical Society with the source of the funding to come from the general fund. Is there any more discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote on that motion. The motion does fail. I'll entertain an alternate motion.
I make a motion that the funding comes out of the Capstone Fund for $25,000 for the Historical Society.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
And this is a pledge or commitment then?
It is a pledge that they have to get their grant.
And it also, the minutes will reflect that the expectation is that if funded, the funding would occur in the last quarter of 2019.
Correct. That has to all be in the motion. Kyle, make it happen.
Work the magic, Kyle.
While Kyle's entering that motion, other discussion on the motion? The only discussion would be, in the course of the discussion on the previous one, there's been discussion about Memorial Park. I'd note for the record that's an agenda a few items ahead, so we'll deal with that at that time.
My only comment is I will be voting in favor of this because I do want to see it, the Historical Society funded. And to me, and I think, Glenn, you made the comment earlier tonight, this is all tax money. Whether, yes, it's an endowment, but we use that money to pay for things we normally don't buy. But if we normally did buy it, it would come out of the general fund or some other fund. So to me, I don't see a lot of difference in the fact that we are funding or this project. I'll just stay with this one. We are funding this project, and we're doing so out of dollars that we have available.
I think it's different as far as tax dollars. This is interest earned off of the sale of the hospital money. And so this is investment income that we've earned. It won't be coming out of the pockets of taxpayers as an annual tax. So there's a difference between coming out of the general fund and coming out of the endowment fund.
There is, if you get it, once you spend it, it's spent. They're both expenses.
Right, but they have different sources of funding.
Both are correct. Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Now, let me ask the council, for the sake of continuity of the flow of this meeting, I think it would make sense to move agenda item number 15 and have that as the next action. Is that?
Great idea.
So with that, Kyle, if we can move to agenda item number 15. This is the Memorial Park Veterans Memorial. We've already discussed this. Recognizing that the county already made a commitment of $15,000. I think the suggestion earlier was $30,000, which ironically is the opposite ratio of what we did with the Historical Society, where the county is the lead on the funder there. So it'd be my suggestion that we would fund this at from the Capstone Endowment Fund in the amount of $30,000.
I make that motion.
Motion by Craig.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion? John.
Just a question, and just looking out here, either Preston or Mark Claith. At this point, in the previous discussion when this came up, we were talking about we have donations committed, pledges of approximately, I want to say, about $85,000. And Marshall, the city of Marshall, was looking at, originally back in December, had said something about $80-some thousand. Are we at risk of losing those pledges if we delay this project on account of the basically not putting enough money into it?
So welcome, Mark. I, as a point of introduction, you're a volunteer that has really led the fundraising for this development. So thank you for your efforts on that. So
Thank you, Mayor and Council. No, that's not going to jeopardize that. And here's how this is going to work. The amount of money that we have raised is what's going to get built. We'll make it so if more pledges come in, we'll be able to add to the project as we go on. I had a phone call last week. A private party's donating a $5,000 check to this too. There's another organization that's giving $25,000. So once this starts going, Preston and I will be meeting with a couple of the contractors. We have a meeting tomorrow. It will move forward. We'll add. We want to get the main part of it done and then build on it after we go. I think once people start seeing something move, we'll have everything laid out to keep going. I think you're going to see the funds come in. So,
and that was my concern, is that if we did not fund the whole project, was the whole thing at a standstill?
Nope.
But you're saying we can proceed with what we've got funding available.
We're going to move forward.
For. Okay, thank you.
So this combined with the county funding will provide the foundational
yes.
For the project, and
yes.
that others can build on.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Now we'll move to agenda item number 12. Or excuse me, agenda item number 13. Agenda item number 13 is to consider the resolution awarding the sale of the general obligation Series 2018A bonds. So, Sharon, do you want to introduce this? And then with us tonight is Terry Heaton, representing Springsteads Incorporated, our financial and bond counsel, bond consultants.
I'm going to welcome Terry Heaton to present the information regarding this item.
Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, we distributed a yellow sheet that has the bid tabulation and also the credit rating from Standard & Poor's. And on your behalf today, bonds were sold at 10 o'clock for $3,580,000. And this is for various projects. One of the things that we do is you have several projects that we lump together into one bond issue. And so these were for street projects, a street reconstruction project, various improvements to Southwest Minnesota Regional Airport, improvements to a park located within the city, and capital improvements to a parking lot, and various utility improvements, and put them together so that you can save money on cost of issuance into one bond issue. And as directed by the council, I just wanted to assure you that the Phase 3 Veterans Wall was eliminated from the financing, and the fire station parking lot mill and overlay were both eliminated after the last meeting. So the results are on the yellow sheet, and there are 5 bids that were received today. The low bid came from Robert Baird and Company, and it's a large list of investors with them, a large syndicate that are part of the bid, and there were 4 others. And the estimate a month ago when we met was about 2.97%, and the actual bid came in at 2.95, so 2 basis points less than our estimate. So very close, but still under. And so we were very pleased with that result. And your cover bid was a 2.96. That's the second lowest bid from Northland Securities. So you had 2 really solid bids right in that range, which always makes us feel good when we at least have the 2 lowest bids are very close like that. They're reading the market well. The bonds were rated AA to AA from S&P. And this evening there was a credit rating report that went out. I know you're also getting a credit rating or a different kind of report from the auditors. But just to assure you that you came out very well, the staff, Sharon Hansen and Carla Drown and Annette, were all part of the credit rating, and they did a very good job of explaining the city's status and giving the rating agency an update. And the result is this: you had a strong management, good financial policies and practices, strong budgetary performance with operating surpluses in the general fund and total governmental fund level, very strong budgetary flexibility with available fund balance that's sufficient to manage your operating expenditures, very strong liquidity, and they do talk about a weak debt and contingency position, and as I know you'll get into in a little bit, you have very rapid amortization. Your debt is falling off with 88.4% of your debt scheduled to be retired in 10 years, which is a very, very good strength that offsets the weak position. It's not like you have a lot of 20 and 30-year bonds that you're paying off slowly. And just to be, they've noted that your budgetary performance, you added $530,000 to reserves when they were looking at this, and you had a lot of areas that were underspent, and you're also looking at a break-even budget in 2018. So they had many pluses to say, and they not only affirmed your AA rating, which is a very high rating, but they gave you a stable outlook. So that's all included in the number of bids that we have and the very good interest rates we received today. And with that, we're recommending to award to the low bid Robert Baird with a 2.95% interest rate, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the resolution awarding the general obligation bonds at 2.958%.
Motion by John, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Greg. Discussion? No discussion. We'll move to a vote. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Move then to agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14 is the presentation of the 2017 year-end audit report for the City of Marshall. With us tonight is Kyle Meyer from Abdo Eichen Myers LLP. That's who the city is contracted with to do the independent annual audit earlier this evening, there was a work session where Mr. Meyer went into detail. I think the intent at this time is to provide a general overview of the state of the city financial as reported in the 2017 audit. Kyle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Yeah, I'm here tonight to go over the summary results of the 2017 audit. Before this meeting, we had a workshop meeting, and we went over a lot of details on your financial position. I just want to give you a brief summary of the results. These are some of the main results. You had an unmodified opinion. Oops, went the wrong way there. And you had the two findings here. We went over those in detail. You have the financial statement preparation finding, because we as the auditors can't be part of your management team, but we assist you in preparing the financials. And then you had some accounting and audit adjustments as a result of the audit. I don't believe this is the short version, but did you have the other? Did you have the other 3-4 page one that? Maybe that. I think I sent two. One was the long version for the first one, and well, anyway, I'll just start going into some of the general, I don't know if that's the right one. General things we discussed, and I think Terry mentioned some of that information. Yeah, this is the one here. Went over that. We went over some of the things with the net financial position. Your net position increased $3.6 million, mainly due to,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Or I won't.
Mainly due to capital grants and contributions was the main factor there. Your enterprise funds are doing well, and also the capital grants contributed to that increase. As Terry also mentioned, your general fund budget increased by $530,000. That's 50% of your next year's budget, and that's been true for 5 years. So you're keeping that level fund balance, the amount that's recommended by the state auditor and the League of Minnesota Cities, and also you underspent your expenditure budget by about $400,000 during the year. With a few exceptions, and mainly in the capital project funds, most all city funds have positive fund balances, good net positions. Debt service, as was mentioned previously too, steadily decreased over the next 10 years from about $4.6 million in 2019 down to $2.4 million in 2027. So you have a pretty aggressive debt payment schedule for the next 10 years. Again, capital project funds have spent down significant unspent bond proceeds in previous years due to the Merit Center, amateur sports complex capital projects, and the enterprise funds currently, as you can see by the cash flow projections and the cash balances, have sufficient cash flows and healthy reserves to pay 6 months of operating costs and plus 1 year of debt service payments. So overall, the city's in good financial shape. Again, didn't get to go over this. We ran long in the workshop meeting, but I just wanted to thank the City of Marshall for to be able to serve the city as an auditor, and also thanks to the city staff for their preparation for the audit. You know, the staff has been with you now for a couple of years. I know last year was a little bit more difficult. It was a transition year, and I thought the staff really improved this year in preparing for the audit. There was less audit adjustments than in the past, so it was a better process.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Open up for any questions or discussion.
A couple things I'd like to point out, and this is, you know, to get out to the citizens, is Marshall did, our budget, we came with a $555,000 surplus last year. I think that's a credit to our city staff and to keep stuff cost effective. Yes, I understand there was some overruns in certain departments. I want to give a credit to the city staff because a $500,000 surplus for the city of Marshall is good. And I also want to, you know, to show Carl doing her job is we decreased our debt by $10 million and only increased it by $5 million. Thus, we decreased our debt last year by $5 million. I know when I ran for election, that was a big issue of the citizens. Let's decrease debt, decrease debt, decrease debt. So I'm trying to get this so the paper gets it in there, that our debt decreased last year by $5 million. I don't have the percentages. I didn't put that together. But that shows we're going in the right direction. And by 2018, or 2028, you have the slide up there. our debt service will go down from 4.6 million to 2.4 million. And that leaves a lot of, that was on one of your slides up there shortly.
Yep.
That leaves a lot of room for us in our budget and looks, well, the future of Marshall looks well. And that's a commendment to the staff and the working on it, that we're going in the right direction. Yes, there's a lot of work to do, but I believe we are going in the right direction. I just want to make that comment.
Other input?
With regard to our debt going down, that assumes we don't borrow any more money, right?
Right.
And-
This is the debt that's there as of right now.
Right, and every year we normally have projects and we borrow more money. So it's not as if our total debt's going to keep going down. We're going to, it's like everyone else, we incur projects, we incur bills, and I think in some respects that slide is misleading because it doesn't show that we're going to borrow more money in the future, and then we're going to have to make payments on that too. So it's not like our total debt and our total payments are going to keep going down. That's not necessarily the case. We don't, especially if we build a city hall, we might get substantial debt with the city hall bonding and so forth. So I think we have to be careful when you read that graph.
Yeah, this graph is more to point out what is your debt as it exists right now doing over the next 10 years, and where do you have the capacity to borrow more debt to keep it somewhat level. That's really what the intention of it is.
Let's talk in a little more detail on that. In our budget presentation and in our audit presentation, that includes the total city. So that includes Marshall Municipal Utilities and the long-term debt that they took on for two primary projects. One is to put the distribution system of electricity underground. The second is to develop the Sandness well field. That's debt that is paid by ratepayers when they pay their electrical bill and their water bill. This also includes the voter authorized sales tax of approximately $12 million that's secured by that. There's other sources of debt that Glenn, you reference also, rightly so, that are secured by things like assessments on streets when a project is done. So there's assessments that come in. So a very small portion of our debt is actually committed for repayment on our general tax levy. And, yes, it's all total obligation of the city, but much of it, the vast majority of it, has a dedicated source that does not involve general ad valorem tax.
I think it could be said that other cities have some of the same situations as we do. I mean, we're not unique in that we only have this particular situation. While we're talking about the debt, and you did have a slide for us before, the debt per capita, and in 2017 our debt per capita was $5,641 per person. I know we keep saying, well, MMU is in there. Well, I did some analysis here, and not every city in our peer group has their own electric utility.
Right.
But I assume that every city in our peer group has a water department where they provide water. And we have to recognize that MMU has two departments, electric and water.
Right.
And so what I did is I excluded the bonding debt from MMU for the electric part because not every city has that.
Right.
And according to my calculations, the bonded debt per population per capita for Marshall would still be around $4,700 if you exclude the electric department of MMU. On the other hand, the debt per capita for our peer group is either $1,932 or $2,180, which means our debt, even excluding the electric department, is still more than twice the debt of our peer group. And that should be something that concerns us. Now, our debt did go down this year, and it went down from $6,555 per person to $5,641. That's about a $900 decrease. But of that, $500 was because MMU paid down their debt. Our debt per capita went down $400, which is still good. I'm glad we're doing it. But we're still substantially higher than our peer group as far as debt per capita.
And I agree with you on that, Glenn. I was just, that's what I said. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I agree with you 100% that our debt is still too high.
Right.
But we did go down. That's a credit to our staff that we're bringing it down.
And I applaud staff and members of the city council because we are heading in that direction, and we need to, and we're taking necessary steps. And that is something that the public should know too, is that we're not where we want to be yet, but we're heading in the right direction. We're not going the opposite direction.
I'd like to add a couple things too in that line about the debt, because I think that's information and attention that's well placed. But I think it's also important to understand what does that debt, even if it's not the electrical, what does that debt represent? And I had the opportunity to have a conversation earlier today looking at the flow in the Redwood River and looking at some of our more historic flood events and looking at the current cubic feet per second that's coming through the Redwood River. And I think, Glenn, you can probably verify this, if we didn't have a lot of the work done that's been done, and granted, we're not out of the woods by any stretch. We could have a heavy, very localized rain event and be in the same situation as a number of our other neighbors are. But I know that the improvements made to infrastructure have improved the protection of our private and public property substantially, and a lot of that debt is that investment also in our buried infrastructure to make sure that our stormwater conveyance and our sanitary sewer conveyance are adequate to take a lot of these, and that they're tight enough that we're not dewatering groundwater with our sanitary sewer system. And that's significant. And when we look at a number of our neighboring communities and communities in the region, not all of them have the ability to deal with it as aggressively as Marshall did. We're in a very unique position here to do those types of things aggressively because of the community that we have and the other industry and population partners to make that happen. So I know that all these other communities are working for that, but we've been lucky to get there, and we got there very aggressively. And I think it's also important to note that we are paying that debt off pretty aggressively on a 10-year, not a 20 and 30-year, and I appreciate that being pointed out.
John?
I guess just a couple of other things too, as we talked about earlier. It is debt is one issue of it, but we do have cash, whether it's restricted funds or unrestricted balances, and those need to be taken into account. And I guess kind of based off of that, I've got a question for Carla, maybe, and Sharon, is do we have funds that are not designated for a purpose that we should be designating for a purpose? A number of years back, not too many years back, the state looked at cities that had undesignated funds and basically pulled the LGA accordingly, saying, well, if you didn't have a need for it, you don't need the LGA. And so at that point, we did take time to at least identify projects that we intended to use those dollars for, because we do have a lot of cash. And some of it restricted, some of it's for bonds, but we do have some that's unrestricted, that we should have a designated purpose in mind for those funds. So if the state looks again at our financial, they're not thinking we're just sitting on a bunch of cash besides.
I think I'll ask you to address that.
Yeah, because we talked about that in the general fund you have the 50%, which is what's recommended, and then you do have designation above that. So you have defined purposes to or assignments of fund balance.
But do we have all of those funds then assigned to a purpose?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's concerned. Yeah.
And certain ones are restricted, like debt service.
Yeah,
and
we've got certain
tax increment
funds.
and things like
Point,
that.
though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions?
With regard to these topics, we did a issuance of bonds tonight, and in the rating service by Standards & Poor, one of the comments that they did make is they indicated our strengths and weaknesses, and certainly one of the weaknesses that they issued or stated was our weak debt and contingent liability position, with debt service carrying charges at 13.9% of expenditures, and net direct debt is 199.4% of total government fund revenue. So even the rating service recognizes that maybe our debt is too high. And like I said before, I'm glad to see that the city's headed in the right direction. We just need to keep working at that. Another one that is indicated here is with regard to debt service coverage. Our ratio is about 87%, and our peer group is 191% and 219%. So we're substantially lower in the debt service coverage ratio than our peer group. And some other comments I had are with regard to the liquor store, and we did an analysis of the liquor fund operations during our work session, but it appears when I look at the liquor fund operations that our gross profit from 16 to 2017 is up by about only $2,000 difference in gross profit. And back in 2014, we had about $1 million worth of gross profit. Now we're at about $1,152,000. Not a dramatic change in the gross profit that we're making from the liquor store. Another item that should be mentioned is the operating income. Back in 2014, our operating income was $566,000. This year, or in 2017, it was $480,000. That's about $80,000 less than 2014. And it's about $35,000 less than 2016. That certainly is a concern of mine.
I think some of that might be due to the depreciation expense on the new store. You got more expense. It's a non-cash expense. So
right.
It's probably higher where you had an older store that was probably fully depreciated. You probably have more expense there. That could be part of it.
Right. I assume it is part of it.
Yep.
The other thing is that the transfers out back in 2014 was $375,000 that we were transferring to the general fund. In 2017, we were only able to transfer $225,000, which is a reduction of $150,000 that normally would go into the general fund. And so, certainly, that's a concern too. See if there's I think I have other items with that. I'll just let it go. I just a few parting comments here. As City Council, we're here for oversight. We were elected to keep an eye on government. And, ultimately, if there's a blame, it should rest with us if things go wrong, because we make the decisions that affect the city. And it's our obligation to make the best decisions we can. We should be informed about finances, but other issues as well. And like I say, it's our duty to look into these, and we should be problem solvers. We're not just here as cheerleaders to cheer on people. You can't solve problems until you identify them. And that's what I've tried to do here, is to look through the financial statements and find out if there are problems. And if there are problems, do they need fixing? And if so, how can we fix them? And I think that's the obligation for all of us here. And we're talking about authorization appropriation. Again, we have an appropriation and say this is our budget for the year. And that's an authorization for the city government to spend this amount of money. And again, I go back to the point that if they want to spend more than that, they should come back to us and get it approved. Because again, we're the ultimate authority and we authorize it. And when they do that, when they come back to us, they should have a good reason for increasing the budget. And if they do, we can certainly amend the budget. But if they don't have a good reason for increasing spending, then we shouldn't approve the authorization appropriation. And they should only spend what's in their budget. And I think that should be by departments, because they determine what gets spent in their department. They have control over it. I don't have, other people may not have control over the amount that's spent in their budget, but they do. And if unexpected expenditures come up, they can certainly come to the council and get approval. And if there's emergency expenditures, we assume that they're going to be taken care of and that the council can approve it later. But again, we have a dual role as members of the city council here. We are watchdogs and helpers. We're supposed to help the city operate better, more efficiently, more economically, and help solve problems. We're also here as watchdogs to keep an eye on what's going on. And the members of the community want us to be doing our homework, studying the issues, and making informed decisions. That's why we're here. And I know that all of the members of the council take that very seriously. And they take their role as city council members seriously, and they all want to do what's in the best interest of the city. and we don't always agree on what the right decisions are, but I think all of us have good intentions. And the last comment I would make is this, that I believe there are two parts here. You had the management part and then the actual audit report. The audit report, I believe, was over 160 pages. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of material. Yeah. And I don't know if the average citizen knows out there that when we look at an audit report, there's 160 pages of material to look at. That's a lot to look at. And anyway, I appreciate working with the members of the City Council. I think we all do our best to make good decisions, and we don't always agree, but like I say, I feel like we have good intentions, and I do feel like the city is headed in the right direction financially. And I appreciate the work that your firm does. I know you give us a lot of guidance regarding the finances to our finance department, and we appreciate the work you do.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Any other questions, comments? I would just conclude by, thanking you as well as the staff. And as Glenn, I think you were getting around to saying that, we did underspend our budget by $555,000 this past year, and that's really attributable to good management within our departments, within our city. So our staff is to be commended for that.
Glenn, did I hear you make a motion to approve the audit report? I thought I heard that.
I'm sorry, did I?
No, I
didn't mean to jump right over you. Go ahead.
I think he made it for me. Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Motion by Glenn to approve the 2017 year-end audit.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Agenda item number.
Could I just make one more short comment? I know I've spoken too much, but I really do appreciate being on this city council because I feel like we all think for ourselves, and we all have our different opinions, and we have free and open discussion. And as our leader, the mayor does a fine job of making sure it's a civil discussion, and also gives people opportunity to speak. And I do appreciate being a member of this city council.
Thank you for saying that. Agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 16 is consider the approval of the Transient merchant license for Sweet Kettle Madness LLC. So ordinarily transient merchant licenses are on the consent agenda. I think this one is here, and Kyle can explain this, and Kyle Box, our city clerk, can explain this in more detail as needed, but I think there's some question from this applicant about the one-day event that this person will be requiring this license for and the fee for the license. I really believe that's the question.
Yep.
So go ahead, Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So, Mayor, you got it pretty much right on there. So, the applicant actually has worked in the city in past events, but those events have not required a transient merchant license for them to operate. This event that they're referring to, Marshal Crazy Days, would require them to have a license, and I've had discussion with the applicant, and I don't believe they're here with us tonight. They wanted to be, and I've had multiple conversations with them, but they just didn't feel, for them to come in and sell their kettle corn, a $315 license would make sense for them for a one-day event. I did put in here they will be here for the Sounds of Summer as well, but that is a community festival, so again, a license wouldn't apply for that event either. So what they're looking for is, I guess, council approval to either, for a reduced fee. I asked for an amount that they would like to see, and they did provide me, and they didn't provide me an amount necessarily, but I do have a list here that they did provide of all the other surrounding cities that they do work in, and they get a food vendor license. And most of the cities, all but one, I believe Brookings, South Dakota, don't require a fee, but just a copy of either their health certificate or certificate of insurance, which most of the cities are $1 million policies or $1.5 million.
$50. they have a 6-month fee of $200, an annual fee of $375, and then an investigation fee of about $50. This isn't considered like a peddler license or anything, is it? Or,
Well,
Under our current ordinance, this is a transient merchant license.
Green River Ordinance, right, is what they used to refer to it as? Correct.
So that's really the larger question. Obviously, we have to deal with this request, but the larger question is, should we, and this would be an item for Legislative Ordinance Committee, should we have a different category for food vendors? Because right now it's lumped in with transient merchant license, which thus the $350 fee for a transient merchant license.
And the bond.
And the bond.
Yeah.
And does that, really should that be applicable for a food vendor that already has their certification from Department of Health? And so,
I think it should be kicked back. In my opinion, no, it should not be a merchant's license. I believe like you said, the $50 fee, but it's something that needs to be discussed at Illinois. For a one-day permit, $315 to sell kettle corn is very expensive.
John?
Now, the $315 is the fee that I know at least one truck vendor that has off track. That's the fee they pay. The one from Wilmer
Correct.
comes in and pays that, but that allows them to sell all year long.
Correct.
Right. So it basically is a yearly fee. So what we're really doing here is charging a yearly fee for somebody that wants to really do a couple of days.
Right. In this particular instance, it's one day that they would be required to have a license for in the city.
Okay.
Well, my thought on this, and again, I mean, I know we want to do the proper process and send it back through the legislative and ordinance, but I think if we made an exception while our rule is being reviewed, you know, I mean, I would be in favor of doing a similar single-day fee and you know, because that way we're not selling them a license for $50 and they can sell the whole year and compete similarly to a food truck. If they were selling once a week for the entire week, that, you know, or for the entire year, if they were here 52 times, $315 is reasonable. If they're here twice, $315 is ridiculous, and I think that's well stated.
a couple meetings ago, didn't we reduce it to $31.50 for
Correct, and
selling
that was
books from
for
door to door?
one person going door to door, who is a transient merchant who would
Right.
require that license, but they're only here for a month, and then
Right.
they're gone.
Right.
So, and that is clearly stated on the license that they've received, is a 1-month license.
I was just, I assume that you're thinking about reducing the rate.
Yes,
And
I
so
am.
I was just going to give you some idea what some other cities are doing. The city of Chaska has a $40 just yearly rate. Hutchinson has a,
For food, right?
this is peddler, solicitor, transient merchant.
Okay.
And then transient merchant for city of Hutchinson is $125. See if I got any more here, but and you said Brookings is like $50 or something like that. So it's kind of all over the place,
Right.
but we seem to be more on the high end. And then and one place, like I said, and maybe that's the direction you want to go, is one has a daily rate, a 6-month, an annual rate, but they also have an investigation fee of like $50. So do we?
And we don't charge for ours. That is done by the Marshal Police Department, and that
So we
is
wouldn't
no
have
cost.
to charge that.
No.
And for clarification, you had mentioned, they want it for crazy days and for Sounds of Summer.
They don't need it.
And they
We
wouldn't.
don't need it for Sounds of Summer.
Correct.
This is really just a request for one day.
As of right now, they haven't approached me working any other days. It'd be for Sounds of Summer, and they'll be here actually Lyon County Fair, but they won't need it
That's-
for then either.
That's different, again, with the
Again,
county.
yep.
To be consistent with what we've done before and looking at it, it would basically be roughly not an actual calendar month, but July 19th to August 18th. We do have precedent where we've done them 1 month for $31.50. So we could stay with a precedent that we set with the previous exception. So we're at least consistent with back action and then send this back to L&O with the background work that Glenn has done. I mean, I think I applaud that to dig in and look at those. But I would make a motion that we can stay consistent, do a one-time $31.50 and then let's send this back to L&O for
1 month.
for 1 month for $30.50.
And not the bond requirement, but the
Right.
certificate of liability insurance.
Yes.
I would
And
second
there's-
that.
Yep.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
The only thing I want to comment on this is when Craig talks about community, as this goes back to L&O, these daytime vendors for these organizations adds to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to my children we go to the 4th of July up in Evelyn, Minnesota, and Becky's wonton egg rolls have been on the same corner for 35 years. And I've been going there that long. So, it does create community because my kids know where the 4 vendor trucks are up in Evelyn, Minnesota, and it costs me a lot of money.
Other discussion on the motion? I would just say, the part of the motion on the referral of this issue for further investigation by a legislative and ordinance, I think really the issue there is separation of food vendor and
Transient.
length of time of the operation. As we're currently is all in with transient merchant license.
Right. Nope.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Who is the motion second?
I made it, Jim seconded it.
Motion passes. Kyle, nice work. You not only presented that, but you also got back and rewrote the motion for the software. So we'll move then to agenda item number 17, Legion Field Road Improvement Project. Consider redistributing the assessments based on the unique properties of now being assessed. Questions about this?
I'm resolution.
Motion by Craig. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes with note 1 abstention. Agenda item number 18. Agenda item number 18, consider the appointment to the Marshal Municipal Utilities Commission. Earlier this evening, the council did meet in special session, interviewed applicant for the Utilities Commission. Be my recommendation that Mr. Jeff Holcomb be appointed to a term on an unexpired term on the Marshal Municipal Utilities Commission, which will expire May 31st of 2020. I'd offer that as a recommendation. Entertain a motion to affirm.
So move.
I'll second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 19. Commission Board Liaison Report. The Fire Relief Association has not met since we last met. The Regional Development Commission, their annual meeting, I think you all have received a notice of, and I represent the Regional Development Commission on the Southwest MnDOT District 8 Area Transportation Partnership. Glenn, maybe in your report you can give the kind of the construction update, but one of the things that was discussed was the 10-year schedule for construction. Of interest here would be this year, and help me with the date, early August, that the construction will begin on the interstate intersection improvement, Highway 23 and Lion Street, as well as the next road.
August 18th.
And then August
18th.
So that construction will begin. County Road 7 and Highway 23 has a similar project. This is both reduced conflict intersections, and that's scheduled for 2019.
Correct.
The other major project for the city of Marshall is on the year 2025. East College Drive is scheduled to be reconstructed, and I believe the boundaries for that are roughly Bruce Street to
4th Street.
4th Street. major project. Lots of infrastructure underground that will be reconstructed at that same time. So it's on the schedule. That's the good news. Of the disappointing, it's always, a ways out there, but it is 2025 scheduled. I also was elected the co-chair of the Area Transportation Partnership.
Wow, congratulations.
Would you miss the meeting?
So with that, Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Joint Budget Committee for the library met today with Mayor Byrne, and Sharon and I met with representatives from the county and with the library director and her staff. And so the preliminary budget work has begun. They will be coming to us with their request. And they have to have that in and approved by the library board before the end of July, and submit it to us as their official request for their 2019 budget. It was a good meeting.
Very good. Glenn?
My commissions have not met.
John?
Okay, the EDA did meet, and ongoing right now is they've opened a process for bidding for groups of lots in the Parkway addition. That bidding ends tomorrow. We have a special meeting tomorrow to open those bids. And with the winning of a bid package, there is a requirement that they start the house in that on at least one of those lots within the first 2 years or first 24 months. So we'll see how things turn out tomorrow with our bidding process. MMU did meet, was not able to attend that meeting due to some other conflicts, but just an update. We talked a little bit earlier, the automatic metering system, reading system, is running behind on schedule due to some of the integration problems that have been seen with various pieces of hardware, trying to interface it back with the systems in place at MMU, and that is being worked on. They've scaled back some of the very initial prototype stages so they can put units in various locations at a smaller scale, but yet test out everything and make sure everything's communicating before they roll on to the next phase. They did have did their annual election of officers at MMU, and so for the next year, now Sonia Kaiser will be the chair of the commission, along with several other positions that were filled. They do a rotative position, so that all occurred on Tuesday nights.
Okay, thank you, John. And Jim?
I was not able to attend mine.
We'll move then to agenda item number 20, staff reports. Sharon?
No.
Well, council member individual items. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only have one, and it's a hats off to our Public Works and Wastewater folks. There was a request that came in yesterday, and actually it started through us, through the Minnesota State Duty Officer, but the city of Slayton is experiencing significant urban flooding and inundation of their infrastructure, and they requested a couple of large trailer-mounted pumps, and the city of Marshal, through the Warren Mutual Aid Agreement that we're a member of, delivered 2 6-inch diesel pumps down there for them to use to relieve the strain on their system and on their residents. And I think that's awesome. I think that's just a tribute again to communities, helping communities, and the fact that we're a significant presence here, and that we will reach out and help our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Glenn?
Yes, I was contacted by one of the citizens of my ward, of Ward 1, and I believe he also probably contacted John here. Anyway, his concern is that he had assessments a number of years ago, and his total street assessment fee was about $8,900. And he was watching our previous city council meeting where we changed the assessment policy, and where with regard to the driveway pavement, now the city's going to be paying 50% and the homeowner 50%. And here the homeowner paid 100%. And his total cost for the driveway is around $2,000. And his concern, he doesn't feel it's fair that under the new policy, he'd only have to pay $1,000. Under the old one, he's now paying $2,000. And certainly that's a problem situation arises when you change the rules. You know, what do you do with regard to people that had prior assessments? Is there some way you can go back and adjust for the amount that they were assessed? I can imagine it would be kind of a nightmare to deal with. And anyway, I indicated to him that I'd bring it up at the council meeting here, his concern. It's just one of those things. I think we've improved the special assessments by amending the special assessment policy, but here's an individual under the old policy that it's costing him $1,000 more for the assessments. And like I said, his total assessments are about $8,900, but that includes, you know, street, driveways, sidewalks, sanitary, and so forth. So it's more than just street and driveway improvements. But I assume there are others out there feeling the same way, that we've changed the rules and it's good for the new people under the new rules, but I think they kind of feel it's unfair to them that they're still under the old rules and had to pay the full amount. Thank you.
Jim?
I have a letter from a gal too. She owns a house at 717 Marguerite Street. And as we do these street projects, Glenn, I know you and I have chatted, and I've chatted on the council, we have to be respectful of these folks, and we have to tell our contractors to be respectful. She was told to contact West to get a conditioner for sewer pipe. She contacted West. She says, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. You know, so here's a gal that was interested in replacing her sewer. She contacted the person she was supposed to, and he blew her off. And that's where our citizens get upset. As they're paying these assessments, you know, they're the customer. And the contractors and our supervisors on the job have to realize that these homeowners are the customers. And if she gets a note stating from RG to contact Wes on the condition of your sewer pipe so we can discuss it, he needs to know what that condition is. That's a failure in the system. Now, how do we rectify this?
That was already addressed at the pre-construction conference. Wes did not attend that, but Greg Mathewitz, who is the owner of the company, attended it, and he is fully aware of that process. If Wes was not made aware of that discussion, we should certainly make sure that he is, because all of the contacts that have been made to the city office concerning private sanitary sewer services have been referred to the contractor.
And that's what she said, and that's and that's where the issue is. And I don't know how to get that more thoroughly through to these contractors. That
I will say another thing, that this project at Marguerite and South Bend have been one of the best contractor-resident relations that we've seen. They've handed out flyers. They've contacted them. We've got several thank yous from the residents indicating that, gee, the contractor has been very receptive to our needs on the project. Of course, it's wet and
yes.
a problem getting in and out, but that really surprises me because we didn't get that comment back at all.
Well, I got it, and
okay.
I should maybe turn it over to you sooner, but she did get the flyer. And
That'd
I'm just
be great,
that,
you know, because they have been exceptional on this project. I'll have to say about RNG. So,
but we do have an upset person out there that may have to read.
We'd certainly take her.
I will provide that with Glenn,
yep.
so you can contact them.
707?
717. It's a rental. Her daughter lives there, so.
Okay.
She lives in Marshal. She's very easy to get a hold of. She has
right.
a Marshal cell number.
Okay, so it's a rental, so we
and
would
she
contact the owner.
contacted Wes herself, and he said,
yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
So they've done their part, too.
We sure will.
God? Or Jim, do you have anything more?
No.
God?
Okay. Just to kind of add to what Glenn had said, I did also get contacted by that individual regarding the assessments. And I don't know if he's contacted you, Kyle, but I think there's some additional things, and maybe I was wrong on who to send them to, but he is also very likely that he could qualify for the over 65 or disabled provision that we have in our assessment, so I did send him a copy of that, and so to get a hold of the city offices, and I gave him your name, Kyle, as a potential to at least start the process, because I think you start the application, but I'm not sure if it was you or the one of you.
Yeah, I was out of the office last week, so
Okay, all right. Oh, okay. But anyway, there is, in this case, I agree, Glenn, it would be extremely difficult and very expensive to try and go back in 8 years or 10 years and try to catch anybody that we've assessed for driveways. But in this case, there are some other conditions that I think warrant a bigger look at it, and probably work with one of our other provisions. Just the last item I have, and I'm probably stealing some of Mayor's thunder perhaps, but while we were here, other people were enjoying cake and ice cream or whatever else, celebrating Bruce Lamprecht and his retirement for his many years of service to the school district. And I'd just like to say on behalf of City Council, thank you, Bruce, for your time to this community as well, and the many years of service to the school. So,
thank you, John. From my part, several things. First off, I think we should acknowledge the passing of Bob Hermer. He served on the City Council for a number of years in the 1970s and 1980s. I don't have the exact years. He served the city well, and certainly an active member of the community for his lifetime. So we should acknowledge the passing of Mr. Hermer. Secondly, I'd say, and Craig, I think earlier this evening, you kind of referenced the flow in the Redwood River. Glenn, you'll probably talk about that. I think we have one of those interesting situations where Marshal, fortunately, didn't receive an excessive amount of rain, but upstream in our Redwood watershed, they certainly did. And our river has been at or near or over flood stage for most of the week. Fortunately, we, are protected, and what, the pre-1996 condition, we would have been in a state of emergency, and we would have had emergency actions taken by the city, and there would have been water flowing where it shouldn't be flowing from the river. And it's a kind of a testament to, I think, good engineering led by the Corps of Engineers to really address flood protection in a way that really makes sense, and that there's enough capacity for impoundment, and also recognizing that there's probably more volume of water going through the city right now than even during some of our flooding conditions historically. So, Glenn, I'd also acknowledge, thank you for your staff. I know there's things that are flowing through the river, like trees and things like that, that take almost constant monitoring so it doesn't cause an issue with the diversion structure or the operation of the diversion channel or any of the other functions along. So thank you for that. You'll comment more on that later, I'm sure. Finally, I distributed to the council a report from the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. I met with these folks this afternoon, and I had met with them earlier. They conducted a listening session in a number of communities around the state, but really focused on southern and southwestern Minnesota in 2017. This is a report, and I think it's very well presented, of the results of their listening session as well as recommendations. And the first part of it is the kind of general themes that they were hearing on issues that our Latino population might be facing in terms of housing or employment or healthcare or education. And then the second part is some kind of issues or opportunities that are specific to some of the communities where they had had listening sessions. So there's the local concerns, when you get to that section, they're specific to the community. So I think this report, I wanted to provide this to the council because I think it's very good information. So with that, I'll move then to agenda item number 21, which now is staff report. Sharon?
Mr. Mayor and Councilman, brief administrator update and 3 follow-ups from the audit presentation. The discussion long-term or on our debt, just as a note, on July 23rd, we begin the long-term debt study with Abdo Eichenmeyer, and I think there'll be further analysis on forecasting and looking at ways of minimizing the city's debt. We are also, of course, beginning to work on the 2019 budget, and within a week or so, I'll be sitting down with finance and looking at the preliminary numbers, and we hope to be as accurate as we possibly can. But things come up, and you try to make a good guess at what you think is going to happen in 2019. And then when I worked at Pipestone County, we had 13 years being audited by the state of Minnesota, by the state auditor's office, and we never received the detail or analysis like the city received tonight from Abdo Eichenmeyer. So I think the private auditing services that the city receives I'm really impressed with the information we get and the analysis. So I just want to make that comment. And then finally, another comment on EDA. The EDA board did review a home tax abatement policy. We did look at the counties as well. We may modify it to make it better for the city residents, and we anticipate this policy coming back to City Council here shortly, and we'll have Attorney Simpson cross-reference state statutes prior to coming to Council. And that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Any questions for Sharon? If not, Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to follow up on the Redwood River water levels. Since I've been here, and I haven't been here that long, 17 years, but in monitoring the river gauges, and this is something that the public is able to take a look at, and it was extraordinary. Starting last week on June 17th, the river gauge was down at about just under 9 feet. It's a gauge reading, so it's all relative. It's not an elevation reading, but it's a gauge reading. In less than 1 day, the gauge reading went up 4.5 feet in less than a day. So the impact of, we also look at the Russell gauge just for indications of trends that we should be looking for Marshal. Well, a 4.5 foot increase in less than 1 day, we were really concerned about that rate increase. And what happened then was that came downstream and came to our diversion structure, and we've got a head wall being constructed in the river, or in the bypass channel itself, that I'm glad that we got the concrete floor poured and the pipe installed, because now it's completely underwater at 4.5 feet of raise. And it continued to raise. That was just the initial bump in the road. From those initial rainfalls, went down a foot or so, and then we got another rain. And it went up again, and then it went down again a little bit. But it really peaked out yesterday, okay? The impact is being felt for a week's period of time. It will be continued to be felt for another week minimum at the high levels that it is, without any more significant rainfall. The flows back last Tuesday-ish were down at about 220 cubic feet per second of flow in the river. This week, yesterday, day before, they were at 2,000 cubic feet per second, 10 times the flow in a week. Just thinking about that a little bit and imagining what that would have been like without the diversion facility is really inconceivable to most people, with that amount of water that would have been coming free flow through the city of Marshall. Back when decisions are made to do projects like this with the Corps of Engineers, it was absolutely amazing to get that project constructed. I can't imagine I can't imagine because I worked with the same issues up in Devil's Lake, but what that takes to get done. We also have issues in the city of Marshall now with significant stream bank erosion. We have some spots that have been identified as I'll say moderate to critical areas. A couple of them are along the park. We've lost a significant amount of banks there, probably about 10 to 15 feet of bank erosion back with vertical faces down at least 10 feet. And when the water is coming through Marshall fairly quickly, that becomes a dangerous location that we're considering in some locations fencing off because of the proximity to young people playing or working along the bank. But we have other, Bladholm Street is another one that we have some significant erosion up by the confluence of the river and the bypass channel. Just before that is another location. So there are some significant areas of I'll call significant erosion problems. And in saying that, then, we are able to control the gates at the bypass channel somewhat, so to restrict some of the major flows coming through town that make that happen. So we are controlling that. And you mentioned the debris coming downstream. I mean, trees, large logs. We've had to clean out the area coming into the gates twice in the last week from real significant debris. And there again, it was not only Minwarn, but we worked with the county. They let us use their backhoe. They weren't at work on last Friday. We were able to use their equipment to take care of it immediately. So just kind of a thank you to the county too for that. So it really, really is a benefit to this community to have that bypass channel and the ability to control flow through town. Even though we'll have some complaints and we'll have some minor flooding along the river and backups into the storm water system, but I don't think most people even knew that it was going on. I really don't. Any questions on the water?
If I could just make two additional comments on that. And, because of the high level in the diversion channel, that's why the bike path is closed between North 7th Street and Highway 59.
Yeah. It's up on the bike path.
It's on the bike path, right. So that part is closed. And, of course, the reason the water comes so fast, and I think all of us know this, but this is the trivia for the night, is that the elevation difference between Marshall, Minnesota, and the top of the Buffalo or top of the Redwood watershed, which is at the Buffalo Ridge, is greater than the elevation difference between Winona, Minnesota, and the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
When it rains up there, which it has, when they get 7 inches of rain, it comes down through Marshall.
Real fast. So that was the good news. The other good news today is that we did get a notice from MnDOT concerning participation in our asphalt crack sealing at the airport. I know it's not a lot, but it was a $40,000 project, and they're offering the 70% of that. So we'll be working on that over the next week to accomplish that. So we've been waiting that for some time, and they put it on our list, and we bugged them a little bit, and they funded it for their 2019, which starts July 1st. So we'll be able to do that this year. That's all I have.
Well, I have nothing exciting about water or saving money or getting money, so we'll just go into the legal stuff. EDA, as John indicated, we are trying to serve as a catalyst or incentivize the sale and development of some Parkway 2 residential lots that have sat empty. There's been very little development in the very past few years, so there will be 9 groupings of lots offered for sale tomorrow. Hopefully we'll see if some sealed bids come in. And as the apartment complex, the unique opportunities, I think the basic documents are ready to go. They are having a contractor open house Friday of this week at the Red Baron Arena. Inviting all contractors in. Here's what we're hoping to do. If you're interested in doing, whether that's electrical, plumbing, framing, roofing, they're going to be having, all contractors are invited, and we cannot close on that sale. We can't get everything signed until the construction plans are submitted for review to the city. The city has not yet received those. Well, as of about 10 o'clock this morning when I talked to Jason, they have not been in, but that should be coming shortly. And also I've met with Preston and Scott from Community Services about the hospice lease and development of the park for the light show for hospice. And there have been ongoing discussions, and in fact, the electrical panels needed to be upgraded for use at the 4th of July celebration, but also in anticipation of this fall's hospice program out there, and hospice has paid half of the upgrade for those electrical panels already. So there's a good partnership going on already, and I hope to be bringing that hospice lease to council for approval at the second meeting in July. It's our time frame for that. So, thank you.
Very good. Dennis? Question for Dennis?
I have one for
John.
Glenn. Going back, just a kind of reminder of those gauges that you're talking about that we're reading. Were those the ones that I think it was the state stopped paying on and we picked up the costs? So we do have that expense in our annual budget, and it's points out it's very worthwhile to have those in there. So.
We share that with ADM, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because both of us have conditions in our discharge permits
Yes,
that
we do.
rely on readings from that gauge.
Yep.
I want to make sure it was the same gauges.
Yep. Same gauge.
State pays for the one at Russell.
Yes.
But they don't pay for the one at Marshall. Yep. Okay, agenda item number 24. The pending agenda items you have before you. Any questions about those? Agenda item number 25, the information items, including the building permits. Agenda item number 26 is the upcoming meeting schedule, which brings us to agenda item number 27 to consider adjourning.
So move.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to adjourn discussion. If not, move to a vote. We'll have a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned.